Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about something different from our normal fare. We're going to be talking about scheduling and unscheduling. If you're not familiar with these two concepts, these are somewhat opposing paradigms about how to manage your time and how to do the things that you find most important in your life with only a limited number of hours per day, days per week, weeks per year. This is a topic that was requested by someone in our community. If there's a topic that you'd like us to offer a webinar on, please let us know. We're always happy to offer something if we know that people will appreciate it and make use of it. So if there's something that you feel would be really helpful in your studies or your work that is writing related, please let us know. So we're going to be talking about scheduling first, because that's a concept that people are generally more familiar with. Then we're going to talk about unscheduling, and then talk about how to find the balance in your life, in your work, in your activities. And that's not necessarily a balance forever, but the balance for what you want right now, because there are all sorts of things that change. We finish a degree, we move to a new job, we have children, we get married perhaps, and all of these can change our priorities and how much time we have, how we want to manage it, and what we're doing in the short term versus long. So let's talk about some of the advantages of scheduling. But first, let's step back and talk about the philosophy of scheduling your time. And with this, I mean the practice of blocking out your time so that you have dedicated time when you do work. Basically, prioritizing these obligations. And the basic idea is that you plan out what you need to do when you need to do it. For example, when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, I would mark on my schedule, 7 to 9 a.m. work on dissertation. And then I would have a half an hour to get to my job. And then I'd have however many hours on the schedule. And then I'd have another hour or two in for writing before my next thing. Now, the idea here is that you're using the calendar as a tool for accountability and efficiency, to be able to show, oh, this is what I'm doing now, and ideally to do those things in that time frame. And that by tracking what you're planning on doing, that you can plan things realistically. If you know, oh, it takes me half an hour to get here, and you block off half an hour in your schedule, and you only use that half hour, great. If you only stay at lunch for 2 hours and you blocked off 2 hours for lunch, okay, great. And then you have this other, let's say, a 6-hour block of time where you are just working, whether that's work that you're getting paid for directly, or working on research and writing perhaps, or doing your schoolwork, your courses, you're writing your papers. And by planning things out, by marking, here's when I need to be working, the idea is that you help avoid having an avalanche of deadlines where, oh my gosh, I have 10 things due today and I don't think I have time for all of them. And also, a very helpful thing, especially if you have a lot of obligations in your life and other people who value and want your time, it gives you a basis of saying no, which, don't get me wrong, is something that I actually enjoy saying in a lot of cases where like, oh, I'd love to help you, but X. And some people will gleefully say, oh, I'm sorry, my schedule says I'm supposed to be working on this right now. Now, you might end up with a schedule like this. And this is an example of a schedule for someone in a very, very busy phase of life, i.e. medical school. So this is something where you have things that are blocked off for time, for classes, for in this case, IS time is independent study, so you're supposed to be working on things. And what usually happens with medical students is that they'll then subdivide this time, and so you'll have, 50 minutes on this class, and then 20 minutes on this thing, and 30 on that, and very intricate, here's what I'm doing right now, I must do them all. And I would say that when this works, it's great. You can see looking at this here that they have left themselves 45 minutes to an hour for lunch every day. They have a rather busy Saturday in here, and Sunday is their day of rest, perhaps their only day of rest here. And again, and for tracking, here are things that we must do. And it looks like from the schedule that they have to be in certain places at certain times, that is very helpful. But we come to that question of, does it work for you? And for people who are very happy with what scheduling is doing for them, great. It's kind of like a diet plan or an exercise plan. If it works for you, if it gets the results you want, awesome. If it drives you nuts, maybe not so awesome. I have friends who have gone on diets that have done exactly what they want for the weight, and I'm like, ooh, I think I would be very unhappy eating or not eating that. I've also have friends who have workout plans where I would say that I am not super fond of what they want to do. I personally just do not normally like waking up at 5 in the morning and going to the gym. Now, if you said wake up at 6 a.m. and then go to the gym, there have been times in my life where I'm on board with that. But 5 in the morning is just not my thing. If it is yours and it works for you, awesome. All other people tell me they would rather be caught dead than be in a gym, especially at 5 or 6 in the morning. So it does mean that one size is not fits all. So now let's talk about unscheduling. And I would say that unscheduling is in part a response to the rise of electronic calendars, of having alerts, of having these pieces of software that are designed to track the things you have to do and prompt you and get you to use every bit of efficiency that you can out of the day. And unscheduling takes a very opposite approach. Now, this is first really formulated by Neil Fiore in his book, The Now Habit, a strategic program for overcoming procrastination and enjoying guilt-free play. And this book here has a couple basic premises. First, that rather than scheduling those things you have to do first, the work, broadly understood, those tasks that you're more likely to want to procrastinate on, to instead schedule time for the things that you love first. And that by thoroughly enjoying those, when you get to the time that's not blocked off for those things that you love, then you will more naturally do work and then log retroactively. So you can see, okay, here's what I did. And by doing this, it's in part designed to overcome an obstacle, which is if you don't do all the things that you want, all the things that you've scheduled for yourself, you may feel guilty, upset, hate yourself, etc., etc. And how this works out is partly a question of, is this a problem or not? Let's look at an excerpt from the book. Why do you procrastinate? The most frequent response to this question is, because I'm lazy. Sometimes said guiltily, like, because I'm lazy. But, as Neil writes, even the worst procrastinators have motivation and energy for some areas of their lives. Sports, hobbies, reading, taking care of others, music, dancing, political debate, investments, surfing the internet, or gardening. So-called procrastinators can be found in every walk of life, accomplishing much in these areas where they have chosen to devote themselves, but totally unable to get started in others. So this is realizing one of those truths. You can have a lot of things that you say you have to do and put them off a great deal. Just think of anyone cleaning and the stereotypical college student in finals week who decides, you know what, cleanliness is important. I'm going to clean now rather than study. So he writes, the now habit perspective does not accept that laziness, disorganization, or any other character effect is the reason you procrastinate. Nor does it accept the assumption that people in general are innately lazy and therefore need pressure, or calendar scheduling, to motivate them. And the book goes on about all these insights into the rewards that we receive from doing things and how, by looking at how we perceive them, has a huge impact on whether we want to do something or not, and that getting the gratification up front makes us better able to focus on the other tasks, the so-called work ones. And so it emphasizes an approach where you treat work as being secondary to the, judging by procrastination, the most important other things in your life that you have or want to do. So in some ways, it's recasting procrastination, just saying, okay, we're going to look as procrastination showing up what is actually important to us. We don't just go and listen to music because we're trying to put something off, but because it gives us joy. We don't play sports just because we're trying to avoid cleaning out the garden shed, but also because it gives us joy and gives us exercise and things like that. And by looking at this as saying, all right, well, we only have one life to live. These things are clearly important. Let's make sure that those get done, and the work will follow well enough. It provides a way of recognizing, oh, these are our lived priorities. It's a thing that if you look at our life, we see, what are we doing consistently? What are we doing regularly? What are we not putting off? And say, okay, well, let's do those things first, and then leave space. And so in contrast to our previous schedule, where we're looking at this is a very full-looking day, to say, all right, well, let's schedule the things that we do want, the things it take joy out of. And in this case, you can see we have breakfast, morning walk. That could even be how you're construing your commute, your morning walk or bike ride or whatever. Some people might put in their car radio time. We see a slightly later breakfast on Saturday, a dance class, breaks for lunch, an afternoon walk. This particular person is going to church on Sunday. Looks like they have a rehearsal, so they might be singing in a choir or something like that. I approve. And if we look at this, there are blocks of time in which work can take place. But it's saying, let's get those important things first. Now, one of the reasons that this is a helpful idea for many is something that they call the pernicious cycle in the book. And it starts at the top with perfectionist demands, one of which might be, we must get this much work done per day. And because these are often unrealistic or just impractical given the conditions we're living in, that can lead to a fear of failure, and because of that fear of failure, we engage in more procrastination. And then self-criticism. And after we've beaten down on ourselves and procrastinated, we get anxiety and depression, we lose confidence that we can do this thing, which increases our fear of failure and procrastination again. If you're curious, the description in the book, although written out in paragraph 4, does use all caps for procrastination and more procrastination. So the idea is that we just go around with a cycle and we feel terrible about this stuff and we're not getting the work done and just is not helping anyone. Now, the idea with unscheduling is that, oh, yes, of course we're going to eat breakfast. We eat breakfast. Yay, great. I enjoyed breakfast. All right, we've got our walk now. And those of you who own dogs know that walking a dog is an important part of the routine and something where things don't go so well if you forget to take the dog out and let them get some exercise, let them do their business, etc. So let's say you say, all right, my day is going to start with a breakfast. Enjoyed it. Morning walk. Okay. All right, well, now that I've done that, might as well do some work. Or, oh, I've walked, I've arrived at the office. Okay, I should do work now. All right, we're hit 12. It's lunchtime. My schedule says I'm going to have lunch. I'm going to have lunch. All right, 5 p.m., my schedule says it's time for the afternoon walk, so have the afternoon walk. And one thing about this is it gives us this, oh, the calendar says I should do this. That is the priority. I am valuing these things. I've privileged them enough to put them in my calendar, and the rest will get done well enough. Now, there's actually a lot of literature where people have written about what they describe as the hidden benefits of procrastination. One of which is the adrenaline rush or energy boost that you get when you have this deadline that's right upon you. Another is that if you know you don't have a lot of time, you have to focus. You stop reading Wikipedia on the side. You stop goofing around putting together that puzzle. You work really quickly and efficiently because that clock is ticking down. And procrastinating makes other things seem easier. Oh, well, I don't really want to, let's say, defrost the freezer. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to wash the dishes instead. And washing the dishes is good. It has to get done. And by putting some things off, you might do a lot of other things instead, more readily. And here's a key one. It forces you to lower expectations. Like, well, we only have so much time for this, so you got what you got. Now, I wouldn't say it's procrastination exactly, but if you are, say, a parent of a young child, you may be familiar with some of these trade-offs. You're like, oh, I need to get this done, need to get these people fed out the door, while also juggling the baby, and so you do things very fast and efficient, because there's that adrenaline rush and you know you don't have a lot of time, and they need this now, or ideally 5 minutes ago. You can do things very quickly, surprisingly quickly sometimes. And after you're juggling all that, there's some things that just become so much easier than that thing you really don't want to do. Now, I do not recommend procrastinating on a dirty diaper. It never gets better from waiting. But if you are looking at something on the order of, oh, yes, I really don't want to wash the ceiling. Well, that was my grandmother's favorite thing for, all right, well, I guess I'll fall asleep now. So, now the lower expectations is that it's something where it is very easy to end up with unrealistic or impractical expectations for whatever you are doing right now. If you are juggling work, it's very easy to compare yourself to someone who is just a full-time student. If you are just a full-time student, it's very easy to look at someone who is working at the same time and thinking, oh man, I must be doing that as well. Well, depends on your situation, your means, and everything. But I will say I have had many students who got a job that required that they have their degree in hand very, very quickly. And by looking at the limited amount of time and recalibrating, I wouldn't say lower, I would say recalibrating their expectations. Say, okay, what do you need to have an approved doctoral dissertation versus, well, if you had years to work on this and extra time and resources, what could you do? And that's often the difference between a project that you do to finish the degree versus trying to have what we'll call a towering castle or fortress of scholarship. And, this is something early on in my career. I was reading books by people who had done things like spent their life working in a cathedral archive and then wrote a book that was the definitive thing about that cathedral archive because they had lived, breathed that for years and years and years. And that is some people. That is how some people's career works. But it doesn't have to be your first project, especially if you're writing something like a doctoral project or dissertation. By the way, if you'd like a more in-depth scroll on these 5 hidden benefits, go ahead and read this article from fastcompany.com. So the real question is not, is scheduling good or is unscheduling good, but how to find a balance that works for you for now. And I will say that in another part of my life where we teach people to write opera, it is a balance between the present situation and whatever the default situation or circumstance and demands that they return to. So you might have someone who devotes time for a weekend, for a 2-week period, for a month, but there will be other things in their life, and once they're done with that dedicated period, how will they continue doing the things they want? And sometimes it's a matter of knowing, okay, here are the rhythms of my life, and here's how I work best with that. So if you asked, are scheduling and unscheduling incompatible? I'd say absolutely not. I know many people who use them together and to compartmentalize different parts of their life. You might have a profession where you are interacting with other people where it makes more sense to have some of those aspects, some of those hours to be more carefully planned. But that doesn't mean the rest of your life has to be. Contrarily, you might have a job that is more flexible, that you can do more ad hoc when you decide, but there are other things that you do want to have carefully scheduled, especially if it's something like, oh, pick up the kids from daycare, pick up the kids from school, get them to the doctor's appointment. Those you might want to make sure you show up on time for that. And that would totally make a lot of sense for scheduling that in. But there is a hybrid approach that I found many people use, in part to break them out of a routine, where they'll jump from scheduling to unscheduling for brief periods of time. And this comes up a lot if you're trying to do a compressed bit of work that you would not normally be able to sustain or keep going at for a long period of time. Think any sort of writings retreat, or someone trying to finish a book or a chapter or a particularly long paper, or think the routines that you might use during finals week versus the rest of the semester. There are certain times where we can work in more intensive periods of time, and where it might be helpful to have that unscheduling thing, or to tell everyone else, please don't bother me. One of the most productive periods that I had this last summer, there was a 2-week period where I told people, look, I'm not going to respond to emails. I'm not going to respond to phone calls. I've set this time aside to finish this specific project. And you know what? A lot of people left me alone and didn't bother me. And when I did connect with them afterwards, it was lovely to have that contact again. But by unscheduling the other things, no, I still had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I still did my grocery shopping and my normal exercise and stuff. I made time for that and marked it in my schedule. But everything else, yeah, it did get done. And it got done without my having to schedule every moment. But by doing those things first and making sure, the clock has rung, it's 12 o'clock, time for me to go get lunch. It was something where I wasn't tracking the minutes as much and wasn't distracted by that scheduling. Now, personally, I'm someone who errs more on the side of scheduling for my regular periods and using unscheduling for other things. For example, when I am traveling, I love unscheduling, and lots of people do. And they'll have like, oh, yes, our dinner date, we have our reservations at 7:30 at that very nice place. But they won't plan out every single minute with the rest of the things they're going to be doing. Sure, you need to meet a boat at a certain time, but we'll get to the beach eventually. Yeah, when we feel like it, we are going to go ahead and wander and climb that mountain. Whatever it is that you are doing, and whether we're talking about pleasure or work, often if you are in a routine with one thing, it is tremendously relaxing to switch to the opposite. And so many of my students will do that and will work on figuring out what makes the most sense for them to do that approach. And if you are in a professional degree program, it may be tempting to go all in on the scheduling part. But if you're finding that's not working for you, let's talk about unscheduling. Because ultimately, it's what you're happy with, what is sustainable for you, and are you getting the things that you believe are really important for you done when you need them to? And sometimes we'll want to adjust something. It could be the scope of what you're doing. I'll again remind you that number 5 on this list, I prefer to talk about it forces you to rationalize expectations. And rationalization can be recognizing many things. The other day, I had an issue with the tire. I wasn't going to drive it on the highway, so I took it to the mechanic, left it, and then I took the train back where I was going. Did that mean that I had exactly all the hours of quote unquote work at my office desk? No, there was a whole extra hour or more that went into the commute. Was I able to adjust things accordingly? Yeah. There were some things that I had marked as optional reading that I'd put in my calendar. Didn't get them done, but am I suffering for that? No, not in that instance. So by looking at this and saying, okay, well, there is, on the one hand, here's this plan, and if the plan isn't working, how do we adjust that? Whether we're going with unscheduling or scheduling, we want to make sure that we are getting the things that are truly important for us. And by the way, the equivalent in unscheduling, if you were looking at a schedule that was more like this, you might say, well, okay, I felt like I was really rushing in that afternoon work period because I didn't allow enough time. Yeah, you can adjust the morning walk schedule or the lunch. But if you're starting out with the basis, you're planning regularly on an hour. If you take 15 minutes here or take a short half an hour lunch there, then that's still respecting the goal of we will have lunch pretty much at this time. And then, see how quickly do you get back to the baseline, or do you want to do a long-term adjustment? For example, some of my family members have started doing a 2-hour morning walk. Great, so long as they like that, awesome. Adjust the schedule and, don't have any appointments before that. And by rationalizing that, by making it more reflective of actual conditions, we won't go to set up, I took too long walking. It's like, no, it's schedule says 2-hour walk. I planned this out. I am doing what I said it would do. Yes, I know you would like to come, Mr. Cable Install Person, at 8 a.m., but my walk is going to be at 9. And so you'll have to come after that. And that is in itself a liberating thing to do, to be able to say to people, look, it just doesn't work. Sorry. So some questions to consider. What do you want now? What goals do you have this week, this month, this year, or perhaps these next couple years? And knowing yourself, what makes you work most efficiently, most sustainably, or most happily? If scheduling is working for you, awesome. If it's working, but it's making you stressed, maybe give unscheduling a try. If you are finding that unscheduling is a great default approach, but there are certain deadlines that you feel a more structured approach might be helpful, no problem. And we're not going to hold you to task for switching paradigms. The goal is that you do the things that you need and want, and to be able to do them sustainably. So that wraps up our talk about scheduling and unscheduling. Again, this came from a community request, so if you would like to request a webinar on a specific topic, please let us know. Send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, and we are happy to add those. Sometimes we even will record videos like this without it being on our schedule for the semester, because we think that would be good for people to have now. And so we'll carve out some time and send it over. So with that, thanks for joining us. Good night.